are back with something new. I am one of your hosts, Amber Solaris, and welcome to the first ever season of Reign of Pain, where we dive into the edges of desire, thrill of endurance, with the art of sadomasochism and pain-related play. So, this is your space to explore, educate, power. Whether you're a seasoned player or you're just beginning your journey into this form of play. So pain play isn't just about sensation, it's about that sense of trust and connection and really transformation. Every episode here will shed light on different techniques, different explorations, journey. Of course, we'll talk about the safety stuff and the inner worlds of people who embrace the sting, the thud, and the different sensations while they surrender to seeing stars. So step into the night and embrace the unknown and find your own version of the Reign of Pain. And of course, as always, a little bit of a content warning. This is listener discretion advised. There is a content warning for potentially distressing topics. We will be discussing a multitude of adult-only topics here, and so you are encouraged to consider your own capacity before continuing. Hi, listeners. Thanks for tuning in for the evening. So for today's guest, we have Red and Jason joining. And this lovely pair is giving us two classes for Reign of Pain, a class on boundaries as edge play and a class on emotional S&M. So would you both like to introduce yourselves a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jason. I have been in part of the Chicago kink community since 2009. So about
15 years?
15 years now. So yeah, so we've been around for about 15 years. I've been teaching since 2012. So about 12 years now, 13 years now that I've been teaching. My primary kink is emotional sadism. It's one of the things that really kind of took the community and turned it into something a lot deeper and personal for me, was taking and finding ways to explore intimacy through psychological and emotional pain. It's something that I enjoy a lot, and when I found that it was something that could be done consensually and with willing partners, it suddenly became something that wasn't this weird thing in the back of my head, but suddenly something that we could actually explore and kind of develop and become part of.
And I'm Red, or Miss Red, and I am an emotional sadomasochist, and I've been in the community for just about 10 years now. Been teaching on all sorts of avenues, primarily with Jason, some on my own. I guess I started just before the great 2020 year. But yes, I also primarily play with emotional play. I do a significant amount of topping. Jason and I also do a lot of co-topping together as emotional sadists. And then I also like to explore that masochistic side, which I tend to do actually with Jason as my primary sadist, where we like to dive into the really, really deeper, darker type of emotional play together.
Thank you so much. And I know you and I both have had a chance to chat a little bit more. So I'm a little bit familiar with your backgrounds and what brought you into kink, but do you mind telling our listeners about kind of what brought you into emotional S&M and what brought you into what that early journey looked like for you?
Yeah, so I actually came into the scene through friends. So when I came into the community, I wasn't really aware that, there were classes and education and all these avenues. I just dove in, and we sometimes like to joke around. I definitely dove into the deep end. in terms of what type of play I wanted to do. That's primarily just from my own personal background. I do write about it quite a bit on FET, but just coming from um, childhood trauma and a lot of other difficult times in my early years that really helped develop who I was as a person, but also, in my sexuality and in my kinks. And, being to a point where I will joke around with Jason sometimes. If he tries to kind of poke at me sadistically about something and it doesn't hit, I just tell him I've had too much therapy for that. So really once I got through a lot of the recovery that people have to do for that, I was empowered to want to have, kind of use what my life had been up to then as something that I could control. And doing that through kink has been very fun and very hot in many ways. And that's kind of how I ended up here. I never actually really dabbled in a lot of the more traditional avenues when people come into kink and, they want to try out flogging or tying or other things that are awesome and fantastic. I came straight in and I was like, how do I cry? Like I want to go straight there. And so that's what my whole journey has been about.
For me, so I've always had so for me, emotional play is incredibly personal. It takes a lot of direct awareness of another person to say and know the things that really kind of speak to their true feelings. And I have found it to be often almost too easy to make people happy, and that people will often imply or try to tell you they're happy while not being happy because they want to make you happy, and it becomes a cycle, and it doesn't seem authentic. So when I found that there was a format that was emotional sadism masochism, a format where you could intentionally hurt someone's feelings, it's much easier to it's much more authentic when you're making someone feel bad. It's honest. It's an honest feeling, where if you're making someone feel happy, it doesn't necessarily have to be an honest feeling. And so it struck me, and it was something that I found absolutely fascinating, was this idea that I could know someone well enough to hurt them emotionally in a way that was unique to them, right? It was something that was specific to them, something that they probably assumed that they had hidden, were hiding from other people. I found that a lot of emotional masochists that I would play with, that was what they were looking for, right? They were looking for a way to be seen that was much more authentic and much more real. If I hurt someone by saying something that they thought they had hidden from everyone, that means that I'm paying attention. That means that I'm seeing them, and that means that they're, being seen and are feeling real. So it became something that I was really, really drawn to. I'm fascinated by the intellectual properties that come with it. So, yeah,
You're just a romantic.
I'm just a terrible romantic.
I think the thing that I'm hearing from both of you is that playing with emotions, Jason, again, for you, it seems again very much part of helping people feel seen, heard, understood, and accepted. And for you, Red, it seems very much about feeling empowered, feeling in control of things, and helping people feel accepted only in a slightly different way. Is that about what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's right from my side, and Jason's nodding alongside me, because I think that the thing about emotional play and one of the things with the darker, like when you're really diving into it, if we're talking about pickup play or casual play, in the emotional realm, you won't get there quite as much, but you can reach a point where when you start playing with the stuff that in society, like for speaking as a masochist, I will hide or, mask qualities about myself that I don't want people to know, whether it's from my own shame or whatever's going on with my life or my background. But when I get to play with that stuff, and then I have partners who want to play with it together and they find it hot, and we have these hot scenes that they're thinking about afterwards, or we get to talk about these really deep emotional experiences. It is very connecting, and it is very and it's like warming to know that you can show someone that side of you, or the things that you hate most about yourself, or whatever it is that you decide to play with in that realm, and then have your partner be like, that was so great. Because that's not how the normal world is, and that's not how we're, taught to perceive world with our imperfections.
Yeah, and I think that the point that you made about being seen, I think is very true. From my point of view, one of the things that has always killed me is we have a society that's built on the idea of being happy. It there's an aversion to feeling anything but joy that seems to kind of run through our culture. And if you're not happy, then you're wrong, right? And I've always found that to be limiting. You know, it's just there's too much to reality to limit it to that simple one-sided feelings. Like, right, there's a whole bunch of feelings that we push ourselves away from, and knowing them and exploring them, I think, is makes us a much more whole person. And it's a lot more authentic, and it's a lot more real. So when I get to play with someone and see them experiencing something that it's very clearly not what psychologically we want to do, it's very against that feel good that pushes through our minds and culture. You're seeing a much more authentic person. You're seeing a much more authentic experience, and that's something that I both want to experience myself, and I want to see other people experience.
Oh, for sure. And I think even that, and echoing what Red was saying there, when we are vulnerable with the parts about ourselves that we don't like and are ugly, it can feel very invalidating for someone to say, "Oh no, but that's beautiful," or "No, oh no, but that's not how it is." Like, "No, but I'm imperfect and this is ugly and that's okay. And that
Right.
can be hot and we can play with that." And that in and of itself is such a great thing for me. And it's something that I really have reveled in the last eh, however long since I broke free from the cult. But yeah, I'm very familiar with that exact feeling that you're talking about.
Yeah, and we always talk about too, well, especially in some of our like lower level ES&M classes, that it's like this emotional play doesn't end, at the end of the scene. Like, you don't say, okay, well, we have wrapped the scene now, like pack up your bag, we're done. And letting, as a top, or and as a masochist, like being able to kind of wallow in my own sorrow afterwards. I'll never forget, we had somebody um talking to me because they were looking for some advice because they were having a difficult time post scene. And I know Jason likes to joke about this. Like, I legit texted them. I said, well, did you masturbate? Like, did you try and get off in your sadness and all of those feelings that you're feeling? And they hadn't yet. And they came back about 45 minutes later and they're like, wow, that worked. Because it is allowing those emotions to have space that makes playing with them so fantastic.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So, what are some of the common misconceptions that you come across from folks when it comes to this kind of play?
Um, so I think this actually it connects to what we were just talking about. One of the things that we talk about a lot when we're first talking to new, especially new tops. So there, there seems to be a pattern that we find where there's often, and I think this is probably because people find it to be more acceptable to be an emotional masochist rather than an emotional sadist. To be an emotional sadist is often seen as tantamount to predatory, and on its own,
Or uncaring too.
right.
People think like, oh, you don't care about them because you want to hurt them.
Right. So people will often not do that, where if you want to have your feelings hurt, the freedom that we have for autonomy, and especially within this community for individual rights, it puts us in a position where even if people want to have their feelings hurt, that's absolutely okay. But what then often happens is you find people that are in many ways people pleasing, trying to hurt someone's feelings because that's what they want. And then you end up in a situation where if the top hurts someone's feelings because they want it, but don't allow them the room and space to feel those feelings after the scene, it can become invalidating. Right. So if Red and I are at play and I was to make her feel bad, but then as soon as the scene was over, I was to be like, okay, now let's, clean up, and all those mean things I said I didn't mean, and it's time for you to feel better. Um, it's gonna be very easy for her to feel like um I'm doing it because she wants it, not because it's an okay thing, which will only make her feel not only bad about wanting it in the first place, but kind of reaffirm it, right? I'm going to reaffirm that it's not a good thing because I'm going to try to clean it up as quickly as possible.
Except when you do that on purpose.
Well, look, let's not get meta on this, but
but I do think on the other side, like I would agree with Jason that it's more acceptable to be an emotional masochist, but as an emotional masochist, when it's very easy to become like the community joke bag, or people want to be involved.
Right.
And, they'll see someone, oh, hey, we all pick on so-and-so because they like it. And there's like the consent wall gets really fuzzy when somebody is very openly an emotional masochist and, doesn't know how to command space for themselves and to protect those guardrails. And I think that can be really difficult when people are first coming in and exploring their emotional masochism. And then on the flip end, as a sadist, I do stand by what I kind of jokingly said earlier, which is that I do think there's a perception that as an emotional sadist, you're heartless or you're cold. And it's interesting because like, I do like to do a fair amount of writing or talking to people about, things that we've done, and like with some of my long-term partners that I do top. And it's so interesting to hear their perception of things when someone might say like, wow, that was so cruel and cold and heartless. And then they're looking at it and they're like, wow, you spent so much time getting to know me, getting to understand what would truly hurt me. And then you hit me at the perfect moment. Like that was so caring. So those are kind of the two sides of it that I see that are oftentimes misperceived as hey, an emotional masochist likes being picked on, so everyone should pick on them. And on the flip side, the sadist getting that like cold persona, even though I don't know, you do have to you have to really get to know someone to really hurt them. And there has to be a connection there.
Very much agreed. Thank you so much. So let's see. Trying to think here. So much to go on here. So, what would you recommend for folks who are interested in trying this sort of play out? I mean, other than attending your class for Reign of Pain, what are some of the things that they should look into, maybe prepare with, or consider before engaging in this sort of play?
You start with that one.
Do you want to, I can start from maybe I'll start from the masochist side, and if you want to pull in on some of the sadism. So from my perspective as an emotional masochist, the first thing is honestly to just really start being very honest and transparent with yourself and your partners. I will say, like, you cannot do this type of play and actually be successful if you don't really know yourself. Like, if you're in denial on yourself, it's going to be pretty hard to be able to play with stuff. The other side of it that we usually teach in our 101 class is, like, if you are brand new to this kind of play, there's a lot of ways that you can actually find and incorporate emotional play into other scenes. So, for example, let's say you want to do fear play and you've done a bunch of needles, but you've never played with knives. And you're terrified of knives for some reason. It's a simple example, because I think there's a good number of people who are afraid of knives. Like, fear play is emotional play. And if you can incorporate it into other scenes that aren't necessarily just 100% focused on your emotion, whether it's like, fears are often really easy ones to target because, people are usually pretty good at articulating those. So, if you're claustrophobic, if you are afraid of heights, those types of things where you're in like a lower risk environment than, say, going for like, here's the biggest trauma that I've ever experienced in my life. Let's play for that. If you're brand new to ES&M, I usually say, start incorporating little emotional bits. And if you have a long-term partner that you are interested in playing with, open a field for what we call like drive-bys. So, I had mentioned earlier that occasionally Jason will take little stabs at me. That's part of our ongoing play, because it, one, keeps him in tune with where I'm at emotionally, but it also keeps our play relationship going. And so that might look like, hey, let's make dinner together. And I'm going to pick on you a little bit about, how you cut the vegetables, or, where you placed the pot on the stove. So, those are kind of like the easier avenues. And then once you start doing that more and more, it'll become part of your language. And then you're able to help start exploring those more complex emotions from there.
One of the things that I also like to do is, and you can find these just by Googling an emotion wheel. And if you look at the emotion wheels, most of them are set up with a series of rings, with the closest to the center being general emotions, so like happiness and sadness and fear, anger. And then from there's an outer ring that is broken up a little bit more, and then usually an outer ring beyond that that's even more complex. So getting one of those and starting with the general fears or the general emotions, fear as one of those that's really easy to play with. And just tease at that general feeling, and talking about the things that could get there. You're gonna have to remember that emotional play does leave bruises, but it doesn't leave bruises like a whip or a flogger does. They're not going to be easily seen until maybe later. So if you start playing with stuff, just take your time, be a little bit more lighthearted with it. Let things set for a minute. If you have a feeling or something, just enjoy it for a minute. Just sit and feel how that feels, and then just kind of decipher for yourself if it's something that you wanted to explore, if it's scary, if it's different than what you thought it was going to be, and just go from there. So, starting general and then just giving yourself time, I think, are two ways to really kind of explore this with a new eye.
Yeah. And I will say too, like, we actually, we will still occasionally pull out the emotion wheel. I love it as a tool, learned it in therapy, use it in kink. And so with that though, I usually will sometimes joke around that like in emotional play, you can target an emotion, you can target a really specific emotion, but there's no guarantee that that's where you're going to even end up close to. So, you know, as part of someone entering this is also just accepting that you might end somewhere that you did not intend to, and that, um, you know, put some measures in place, know what kind of aftercare you might need, like know, you know, make an agreement on how you can maybe shift the tone of a scene if it starts to go down a route that you don't, you know, that you're not looking for it to go down. But you have to accept that unknown, because everyone handles situations and, you know, things that are said differently. And while someone might be trying to make you feel humiliated, you might instead just feel isolated or you know, abandoned if that's that humiliation comes with other things that you weren't prepared for. So just preparing yourself for the unknown and just accepting that. And that's kind of why we usually encourage people to stick more towards the root emotions and more towards like some of the straightforward like baseline ones, rather than diving deep right away, just because of that unknown gets more complex the deeper you get into your emotional layers.
And knowing that you're gonna screw up, I think is really important to remember from the beginning. Look, this is really complicated, where our feelings as people are super complicated, and they are mixed, and you might have a scene that goes into an emotional place that's amazing, and you can follow it up and do the exact same scene blow for blow, and have it work not the same. I think that we've all seen that happen, and part of that is because we're trying to figure out, maybe something is different, maybe there's a smell that's different, maybe how long we've spent, you know, at work is different. There's a bunch of different reasons why it might have a negative effect. So knowing that's gonna not always work, and that this is a trial and error process, and that we have to be forgiving to ourselves and our partners about how we go about learning, is super key to making emotional play really stick and really work.
Thank you both so much for that. Very wonderful advice there. I think a lot of folks are engaging in emotional based play without even realizing it. I think it's something that a lot of players could be more mindful of. Um, and with that being said, also, one of the things that impressed me the most the last time we chatted was just how much individual responsibility the both of you take for putting yourselves back together and for your own emotions. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think,
Yoda?
well, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So from my side, I am a very strong advocate for, you know, this idea that nobody can actually make you feel anything. You have to be susceptible to them, and you also have to have some sense of belief in it yourself. So, you know, a good example would be like if Jason told me that he was disappointed in me, you know, that even just saying that it elicits an emotional response for me because I have a connection to Jason. And for me, I don't want him to be disappointed in me. So if he says that to me, you know, I will very easily choose to believe that. There are some times when he'll say that to me when I straight up know it's not true. And I will not choose to believe that, because I'll be like, no, I didn't. But there, you know, there are strangers on the street that if I was walking past them and they just looked at me and they were like, you're a disappointment, or, you know, you're a disappointing person, whatever their insult is, I legitimately would not care. I would be like, wow, that person's
Got
having
an
a day.
issue.
Like, I don't know what's going on with them, but okay. And I would move on with my life. And because I take that level of ownership in, you know, I do have to be vulnerable when I'm taking the position of being Jason's masochist. Like, I have to give that power. I have to be willing to say, like, okay, I'm gonna let the things that he says impact me. But I also recognize that no matter what he says, he also can't put me together, because once again, I own my own emotions. So if I'm feeling like absolute crap after a scene, I I can't blame Jason. I can't tell Jason he has to, you have to fix this. You have to put me back together because I have work on Monday. I have to go into it, one, knowing that I might feel terrible for days at a time. And then two, I have my own like self-care processes that I like to go through to help bring myself back to a baseline. And that level of ownership is something that we also look for, like in the partners that we co-top too, because I can't get in someone's mind and tell them something. If they believe it and they want to believe it when they hear it from me, they're going to be the ones that have to crawl out of that hole on their own. And as a top, I can support them in ways that, we've communicated and agreed upon, that like, yes, I can offer the support. But aside from that, like the masochists, we really do have to do the hard work of pulling ourselves out of those holes. Granted, I mean, masturbating is one fun way to do it, and it usually works for me.
And so from the sadist point of view, the other thing that you have to bring into it is you have to bring into it a very deep level of trust for your masochist and your partner. When you are playing with them and you are hurting their feelings and you are doing these things, you're doing them you're doing them with intention. You're doing them with an awareness that what you're hoping to say will open up feelings for them that they are going to take on, that are where they want to go, but they also may take on completely different feelings. And that what you have to do as a top is to trust, okay, I'm going to get a sincere response from the bottom. I'm going to get an honest interaction with them, which will give me both fuel, right? If I say something and the person I'm playing with is affected and they show me that they're affected, it will make a big difference. It'll mean that I can do it more. If I don't see it, then I can't confirm that I'm in the right path. But I also am going to trust that the bottom's going to give me their honest response about whatever feelings they're feeling. If they're not feeling what I think they're feeling, then I'm going to follow a different path than maybe what needs to happen. I had one partner that we have a running game of basically text torture, where I will chastise her and yell at her by text. And one time she was telling me about something, and we were in person and we were talking, and she says, well, you've no idea how many times I cry after we've done that. And I'm like, what's the point if you don't show me that? If I'm doing this, I'm not doing this to just be mean. I want a response. And if you don't show me that you're crying, then I don't get anything out of it. And she's like, see, you want to see me cry? And I'm like, well, I want to make you cry. If I want to make you cry, yeah, I want to see it. And so it became this like a deeper piece, where now if I torture her and she starts to cry, she has to send me a picture so that I can recognize what I've done. But it makes a connection, right? And I have to trust that she's going to do that. She could hide it from me. She doesn't have to tell me she's crying, but if we're doing this, that's how we connect and how it becomes enjoyable.
I think part of it too is with the emotion ownership, is that as soon as the sadist wants to start taking like almost responsibility for the emotions, you get back into that loop of like, the loop we talked about much earlier around like feeling bad for feeling these feelings or feeling bad for wanting this. Like, I don't want to tell Jason that I'm feeling a certain way after a scene and then have him show signs of like guilt or remorse for having me be in that state. So like one of the easiest ways to get away from that is he also accepts that my emotions are mine to own. And so when I'm sharing them and when I'm processing things from a scene, you know, he's supportive and responsive, but he doesn't take any ownership of what I'm feeling, because he doesn't, once again, want to invalidate that experience or those emotions that I've been having, because he knows that it's kind of common for an emotional masochist to want to be like, oh, okay, I'll just be fine then.
Right.
Because, you know, we want to fill our emotional bucket back up as quick as possible so we can dump it again.
You bring up several really great points there, in that dance between, you know, the intended negotiated pain versus the not wanting anyone else to be made uncomfortable with it, and then not wanting any of the unwanted discomfort surrounding it. It's a complex factor.
It really is.
I absolutely love it. Well, is there anything else? Where else can folks come to read your writings and things, and take a look at some of the work that you've done?
Yeah, so I do dabble in the occasional writing on FetLife. My FetLife handle is miss_R3D. And that's primarily where you can see stuff written. If you're local to Chicago, I also am around and about. We host a couple different events, so it's all on my FetLife page. But I am always very enthusiastic to talk ES&M, because it is what I like to do every day.
I most of my writing, I had put together a web page a while ago, and
Collared me. I just age you.
Yeah, way to go. I had attempted to put together a WordPress a while ago, but I didn't keep it up. Most of my writing is the best places is on FetLife. I can be found at Magister Nodi, which is MAGISTERNODI. And if you, I mean, you can follow the link for Red and find me that way too. Yeah, and then I think that we both like to write a little. It's almost exclusively emotional play, and about our emotional play. Some of it is a little more theoretical, but a lot of it is actual and direct connections. We both came into emotional kink, and we're both introduced to the idea of evolving or writing out your scenes after you've done them, as a great way of kind of exploring your feelings that may not make a lot of sense or have a lot of words in them in the moment, but if you write them up afterwards, you can start to really develop. So both of us have done that for a while.
Yeah, so most of our writings are either a combination of educational and storytelling, or pure just good old hot storytelling, but it's all emotional play. And yeah, and our class is kind of like that too. You know, attending our class in a few months here would be, we like to give real life examples to help people understand like how concepts and techniques can be applied. So we usually have a pretty good time in class.
Absolutely love it. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us for this particular episode of the Reign of Pain podcast. And we absolutely have loved having Red and Jason for this evening. And be sure to join us for our next episode. And this is Ember signing out.